The New Year's Eve ball was dropping, and so were my inhibitions. Picture this: a high-end club, frothing beats, and me, swirling in a cocktail dress with my guy friend, Mike. We were laughing and dancing, the kind of carefree you feel when the night is young and the champagne is flowing. Mike was more than a friend, really. He was the brother I never had. Our friendship was a tapestry of inside jokes and shared memories. As we danced under the shimmering lights, I forgot about everything else, including the time. When the clock struck midnight, confetti rained down like a promise of new beginnings. I was too caught up in the moment to notice my phone lighting up with calls from Rick, my husband. With each ring, an opportunity to check in slipped away, lost in the rhythm of the music. The night wore on, and the drinks kept coming. Mike, never one to turn down a good time, matched me drink for drink. But as the club began to empty, reality started to seep back in. Mike, with a drunken seriousness, insisted on escorting me home. "It's not safe for you to go alone," he slurred, his arm draped over my shoulder. We stumbled out of the club into the crisp night air. The city was eerily silent, a stark contrast to the pulsing life we had just left behind. We sang loudly, our voices echoing off the empty buildings. It was 2 a.m., the time when revelers retreat and the night regains its calm. Reaching my house, I fumbled in my purse for the keys. They jingled mockingly as I tried several times to fit them into the lock. Finally, the door swung open, revealing a dark, silent interior. The kind of quiet that instantly makes your heart race. Stepping inside, a sense of unease washed over me. The house was too quiet, too still. Where were the familiar sounds of Rick waiting up for me, or at least the soft snoring that greeted me on other late nights? I called out, "Rick?" My voice sounded small, swallowed by the emptiness of the house. No response. The only sound was the distant closing of a car door outside, probably a neighbor returning from their own New Year's celebration. Mike stumbled past me, heading for the living room. "Where's the in this place?" he mumbled, fumbling along the wall. I followed him, my heart pounding louder with each step. As the light flicked on, the reality of the situation hit me like a physical blow. The living room was bare. The couch, the TV, the little knickknacks that made the house a home, all gone. It looked like a scene from a movie, where the character comes home to find their life packed up and moved out. I felt a chill run down my spine. This couldn't be happening. It must be some sort of mistake, a misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew. The ignored calls, the forgotten promises, the night spent prioritizing everything but my marriage, they had all led to this moment. The house seemed to close in on me, the walls echoing the emptiness of my heart. I had danced the night away, oblivious to the crumbling of my world. As the truth settled in, I realized this was just the beginning. The night everything changed. There's a kind of silence that screams. That's what hit me as I stumbled into my living room, the one that was always cluttered with Rick's sports magazines and my throw pillows. But now, it was an echoing cave of emptiness. No furniture, no TV, not even the ugly lamp Rick's mom gave us. Just hollow space where life used to be. I felt like I was in one of those dreams where you show up to school naked. Exposed. Vulnerable. Only this was no dream. Mike, swaying slightly beside me, let out a low whistle. "What happened here?" he slurred, but I barely heard him. Panic clawed at my chest as I bolted to the bedroom. Maybe this was a joke, a bizarre prank. But the bedroom was just like the living room, barren. The only thing left was a note on the floor, lying there like a final verdict. My hands trembled as I picked it up. Rick's handwriting stared back at me, each word a stab. "Can't do this anymore. You've made your choice. Goodbye." The paper crumpled in my fist. Choice? What choice? Tears blurred my vision, but I couldn't cry, not yet. I had to understand. I yanked my phone out, hitting Rick's number. It rang once, then a dead tone. Blocked. My heart sank. He had planned this. While I was out, laughing and drinking, he was erasing himself from my life. Mike's voice broke through my shock. "We should call the cops. This looks like a burglary." Burglary. The word bounced around in my head, but it didn't fit. Burglars don't leave goodbye notes. No, I muttered, it's not a burglary. It's Rick. The realization hit me like a bucket of ice water. All those arguments, the nights I came home late, the times I chose fun over my marriage, they weren't just bumps in the road. They were nails in the coffin. I sank to the floor, the note still clenched in my hand. My life, as I knew it, had vanished while I was clinking glasses and making toasts. How did I not see this coming? Why didn't I pick up the phone? Mike hovered awkwardly, a bystander in my personal apocalypse. What are you going to do? He asked, his voice unsteady. What was I going to do? The question echoed in the empty room, a room that once held laughter, arguments, and whispered secrets in the dark. Now, it held nothing but the echoes of a love that had silently packed its bags and slipped away. I stood up, my legs shaky. I don't know, I admitted, the words heavy with a truth I wasn't ready to face. But I have to figure it out. In that empty house, with the remnants of my shattered life lying in my palm, I knew one thing for sure. The party was over, and the real world was waiting outside, unforgiving and real. Never thought I'd see the inside of a police station looking like a hot mess from a New Year's Eve party. But there I was, with Mike, trying to explain my situation to a couple of officers who looked like they'd heard it all. Their skeptical eyes took in our disheveled appearances, obviously not buying that my husband emptied our house while I was out partying. Story. Ma'am, are you sure this isn't just a misunderstanding between you and your husband? One officer asked, his tone suggesting he'd rather be anywhere else. Frustrated and embarrassed, I insisted it wasn't a misunderstanding. But the more I talked, the more I sounded like a character from a daytime soap opera. We left the station with nothing but "we'll look into it," and my dignity in tatters. As I trudged back home, the morning sun was too bright, too cheerful for my mood. That's when I bumped into Mrs. Kowalski, my nosy but well-meaning neighbor. Saw your husband loading up a big truck late last night, she said, her voice a mix of concern and curiosity. Everything all right, dear? No, Mrs. Kowalski, everything was far from all right. I thanked her, my mind racing. Rick had planned this meticulously. The realization stung more than I cared to admit. I needed support, someone to tell me it was going to be okay. So, I started calling friends. One by one, they all gave me the same spiel. They'd seen it coming, warned me about my carelessness. You pushed Rick too far this time, they said. I couldn't believe it. My friends, the ones I'd laughed and cried with, were taking Rick's side. Had I been that blind to my own behavior? As if on cue, my phone rang. It was work. We've seen a video of your New Year's Eve antics, my boss said, his voice cold and formal. We're putting you on suspension, effective immediately. Rick had sent them the video. Humiliation washed over me. How could he do this? I hung up, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. My job, my friends, my marriage, everything was slipping through my fingers. Mike, who'd been awkwardly quiet, finally spoke up. I'm really sorry, you know. If there's anything I can do. His voice trailed off as his phone buzzed. The look on his face after the call said it all. Just left me, he muttered, his eyes not meeting mine. Said she's tired of my irresponsible behavior, that she can't trust me anymore. Great. Now I'd managed to drag Mike into my personal hurricane of disaster. The guilt piled on top of the shame and heartbreak. There we were, two castaways stranded in the aftermath of what was supposed to be a fun New Year's Eve. I never imagined my life unraveling so quickly, like a sweater caught on a barbed wire. The irony of it all was almost laughable. Almost. We sat in silence, the weight of our respective worlds crushing us. I wanted to cry, scream, maybe even laugh at the absurdity of it all. But I did none of those things. I just sat there, lost in the chaos of my own making. Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying the video so far. If you do, please take a moment to hit that like button, it really helps me out and lets me know you appreciate the content. Also, if you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel. Subscribing is a great way to stay updated with all the latest videos and to be part of our growing community. It's quick, it's free, and it ensures you won't miss out on any upcoming content. So go ahead, smash the like button and hit subscribe. Your support means a lot and keeps this channel going. Thanks for watching. You know that saying about life giving you lemons? Well, mine just dropped a whole lemon tree on me. There I was, alone in my now empty house, holding an eviction notice. Turns out, Rick had been paying the rent, and guess what? It was overdue. The words on the notice blurred as reality sunk in. I was about to be homeless. I started packing, which wasn't much since most of our stuff had vanished along with Rick. That's when I stumbled upon a box tucked away under the bed. Inside were old love letters from Rick. Each letter was like a time capsule, taking me back to days filled with promises and affection. How did we go from love struck to just struck down? Needing a break from the emotional turmoil, I headed to a nearby cafe. Big mistake. As I sipped my coffee, I couldn't help but overhear snippets of conversation from the next table. That's her. Husband left her. Emptied their house. The words stung like salt in a fresh wound. Public humiliation, the new flavor of the month. I left the cafe in a hurry, my mind racing. The bank account. Our joint savings should help me get through this mess. Except, when I checked, the account was as empty as my living room. Closed by Rick, of course. Just when I thought it couldn't get worse, the skies opened up, unleashing a torrential downpour. With no place to go, I found refuge in a cramped, damp-smelling motel room. It was the only thing I could afford, which wasn't saying much. There, in the lobby, drenched and defeated, I ran into Jenna, an old friend from college. Her eyes whitened in shock. "What happened to you?" she asked, concern etched on her face. I must have looked like a stray cat caught in the rain. Jenna, bless her heart, offered me a place to stay. Just for a few nights, she cautioned. I nodded, grateful for any shelter, no matter how temporary. Settling into Jenna's guest room, I thought maybe, just maybe, things were looking up. Then came the knock on the door. A legal notice. Rick was filing for divorce and, to add insult to injury, wanted full custody of our dog, Baxter. The little furry guy who'd been our first baby. I needed a lawyer, obviously. But when I started calling around, the reality hit me again. Lawyers cost money, and money was something I didn't have. Each consultation fee, quoted, was another door slamming shut in my face. Then Rick's lawyer reached out. "We're prepared to offer a settlement," he said, his voice oozing fake sympathy. The settlement was a joke, barely enough to cover a few months' rent. But he was pressuring me to sign, saying it was a generous offer, considering the circumstances. Generous? I wanted to scream, cry, maybe both. But instead, I sat there, staring at the eviction notice, the legal papers, the empty bank account statement. This was more than just a bad hangover from a New Year's Eve party. This was my life crumbling, piece by piece. And in the middle of it all, there was me, trying to figure out how a few wrong turns led to a dead end. If I thought things couldn't get worse, I was dead wrong. Staying at Jenna's was like walking on eggshells, only I was more of an elephant in a china shop. One clumsy move, and I knocked over her grandmother's antique vase. The sound of it shattering was like the final toll of a bell. My welcome had officially expired. Jenna tried to hide her frustration, but I could see it. The tension in the air was thicker than fog. The next morning, over a breakfast we both picked it, she dropped the bomb. "I think it might be best if you find another place to stay," she said, not meeting my eyes. I couldn't blame her. The space that once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a courtroom where I was the accused. Packing my meager belongings, I thanked her and stepped out into a world that seemed to grow colder by the second. Back at the motel, with its peeling wallpaper and musty smell, I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. That's when he approached me. A stranger with a proposition that reeked of trouble. "Easy money," he said, his eyes scanning the room like he was expecting the walls to listen in. I knew better than to trust a guy who looked like trouble's best friend. But desperation makes you consider options you'd normally run from. What's the job? I asked, hating myself a little for even entertaining the idea. He laid out the plan in hushed tones. It was smuggling, plain and simple. My gut screamed to walk away, but the empty pit in my stomach, the one that hunger and fear had dug, urged me to listen. I agreed, tentatively. He gave me a sharp nod, his smile not reaching his eyes. Meet me here tomorrow night. Don't be late. And just like that, he was gone, leaving me to stew in the broth of my bad decisions. That night, I lay in the creaky motel bed, the springs poking at my back, reminding me of the reality I was in. Smuggling. The word echoed in my head, a sinister whisper. Was I really this desperate? But then I thought of the eviction notice, the empty bank account, Rick's lawyer with his smug face. I needed money, and I needed it fast. This was no time for morals, it was survival. The next day was a blur. I moved like an automaton, my thoughts clouded with what I was about to do. As night fell, I found myself back at the motel, the stranger's instructions playing over in my mind. There was a chill in the air as I stepped outside, the kind that seeps into your bones. I wrapped my jacket tighter around me, a meager shield against the night that was about to unfold. I knew the risks, the danger I was stepping into. But when you're standing on the edge of desperation, sometimes the only way out is to jump into the abyss and hope you can fly. Tonight, I was either going to soar or crash. Either way, there was no turning back. The night of the smuggling operation was a blur of shadows and adrenaline. I was there, in some dingy alley, heart pounding in my ears, trying to convince myself I was doing this for survival. But the universe had other plans. Red and blue lights shattered the darkness, and the sound of police sirens filled the air. A raid. Just my luck. I remember running, my breath ragged, my mind screaming. I don't know how, but I managed to slip away, blending into the night like a shadow. Once I was far enough, I collapsed against a wall, my whole body shaking. This was it. My wake-up call. I needed to get as far away from this mess as I could. The next day, I tried to cut ties with the stranger, the guy who got me into this. I told him I was out, that it was too risky. But he just laughed, a cold, hard sound that sent shivers down my spine. You don't get to walk away that easily, he sneered. I was scared, more scared than I'd ever been. But what could I do? Go to the cops and say, hey, I was smuggling stuff, but now I want out. Yeah, right, I was trapped, and he knew it. Then came the package. No return address, just a plain brown box sitting at my motel room door. Inside were photos, pictures of me during the operation, my face clear as day. My heart sank. Blackmail. This guy wasn't just trouble, he was a nightmare. I stared at the photos, my hands trembling. This was it. The evidence that could ruin what little I had left of my life. The stranger had me in a vice, and he was tightening his grip. I met him again, the photos burning a hole in my pocket. What do you want? I asked, hating the fear in my voice. Just a few more jobs, he said casually, as if he was asking me to pick up groceries. Then we're square. A few more jobs, a few more nights of risking everything. I felt like I was drowning, each decision pulling me deeper into the dark waters of crime and desperation. So, I agreed. What choice did I have? The photos were a ticking time bomb, and he held the detonator. I was his puppet now, dancing to the tune of his threats and demands. That night, as I lay in the motel bed, I couldn't help but wonder how I got here. From a wife with a shaky marriage to a criminal on the run. Each choice I'd made, each step I'd taken, had led me to this moment. I thought back to the New Year's Eve party, the laughter, the carefree joy. It felt like a lifetime ago. Now, I was caught in a web of my own making, each strand a choice that led me here. I closed my eyes, the images of the photos and the stranger's cold eyes haunting me. I was in too deep, and climbing out seemed impossible. But I knew one thing for sure. I had to find a way out, no matter what it took. The alternative was a life in the shadows, and that was a life I couldn't live. There's a saying about hitting rock bottom, but I swear, I was digging a whole new level. In a desperate move, I tried reaching out to Mike, my one-time party companion and supposed lifeline. But the guy had vanished off the face of the earth, no calls, no texts, nothing. Just my luck, right? It was during another one of those dodgy tasks that things took a nasty turn. I tripped in some godforsaken alley, twisting my ankle badly. Pain shot up my leg like fireworks, but what was I gonna do? There was no time for pity parties in my line of work. The stranger's threats echoed in my mind, louder than my throbbing ankle. Limping and wincing, I pushed through another task. This one was riskier, the stakes higher. I should have known it was too much, too soon. But when you're swimming with sharks, stopping to lick your wounds isn't exactly an option. Then it happened. In the middle of a handoff, things went south real fast. A deal gone wrong, a flash of steel, and suddenly, I was a witness to a violent crime. Blood, shouting, the whole 9 yards. It was like a scene straight out of a crime show, only there were no cameras, no retakes. That night, I couldn't shake the images from my head. The sound of my heart pounding in my ears was a constant reminder of the danger I was in. The criminal world wasn't just dark, it was a black hole, sucking me in deeper with every move I made. Fear, real and raw, gripped me. I was way over my head, playing a game with no rules and no mercy. There was only one way out of this mess, the police. The thought made my stomach churn. Going to the cops meant exposing everything, my involvement, the smuggling, the blackmail. But what choice did I have? The next morning, I found myself outside the police station, my injured ankle throbbing in protest. My mind was a battlefield, doubts and fears clashing with the desperate need to escape the nightmare my life had become. Stepping into the station was like stepping into another world. The bright lights, the sound of radios crackling, officers moving about, it all felt surreal. I approached the front desk, my throat dry, my words barely a whisper. "I need to report a crime," I managed to say, my voice trembling. The officer behind the desk looked up, his expression changing as he took in my disheveled appearance. As I sat in that cold, sterile room, spilling my guts about the smuggling, the blackmail, the violent crime, I felt like I was shedding a heavy coat. With every word, I was exposing myself, my mistakes, my fears. I was placing my life in the hands of the law, a gamble that could either save me or sink me deeper. But at that moment, in that small room with its flickering fluorescent light, it was the only play I had left. Walking out of the police station, I felt a mixture of relief and dread. Relief that I'd finally taken a step towards ending this nightmare, and dread for what was to come. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear, there was no turning back now. Sitting in that police station felt like being in the hot seat of the world's worst game show. Their skeptical looks said it all, a woman like me, tangled up in a crime web? Yeah, right, I could almost hear their thoughts, she's just another sob story. But desperation has a funny way of making you persuasive. I laid it all out, the smuggling, the blackmail, everything. The officers exchanged glances, their skepticism slowly turning into interest. The deal they offered was straight out of a crime drama, protection in exchange for my cooperation. I was to be their ticket to busting the operation wide open. Suddenly, I was under police protection, a phrase that sounded comforting but felt like living in a gilded cage. The officers assured me I was safe, but the shadow seemed darker, and every creak and whisper felt like danger lurking around the corner. Testifying in court was like reliving a nightmare. The criminals, those faces I'd hoped to forget, were right there. My voice shook as I recounted everything. When the judge slammed the gavel, announcing high-profile arrests, a part of me wanted to cheer. But as I left the courtroom, a chill ran down my spine. This wasn't over. The first threatening message came the next day. "We know where you are," it read. My heart stopped. The police had nabbed some of the bad guys, but not all. I was a loose end, a liability. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks, I would never be safe. I had no choice. I packed my bags and moved to a new city, a place where no one knew my name. Starting afresh, they say it's as good as a rest. But how do you rest when nightmares haunt your every waking moment? Finding a job was a Herculean task. My reputation, or what was left of it, had somehow raced ahead of me. The whispers, the sideways glances, it was New Year's Eve all over again, but this time, the confetti was made of my shattered life. I became a ghost, cutting off ties with everyone. Friends, family, they were part of a past life, one that now seemed like a distant dream. My world shrank to the four walls of a dingy motel room, my only sanctuary. Then, one night, it happened. My door was kicked in, and terror gripped me. I barely managed to escape, my heart pounding against my chest like a wild drum. Running into the night, I realized the bitter truth. I was alone, truly alone. And now, here I am, standing on a bridge overlooking the city. The lights below used to represent hope, dreams, life. Now, they're just distant stars in a sky I can't reach. I've lost everything. My husband, my home, my dignity, my sense of safety. Even my own identity feels like a tattered dress I can't wait to take off. The water below whispers, inviting me to forget, to let go. But I stand firm, a solitary figure against the night. This is my reality, a world where trust is a luxury and every shadow hides a threat. My story isn't one of redemption or triumph. It's a tale of survival, of a fall from grace with no safety net. As the night wraps around me, I realize that this